On the planet of Drixon, humans were nothing more than a curiosity. The alien races of the galaxy viewed them as primitive beings, struggling to survive on a small, remote planet. Most believed that humans were not capable of understanding the more advanced civilizations in the galaxy. However, Mark Anderson, a young diplomat from Earth, had been chosen to represent his people at the annual Galactic Peace Summit. The task was simple: show the galaxy that humanity could be more than just a nuisance, that they had the potential to be part of a greater whole. Mark had never been to Drixon before. The planet was known for its beautiful landscapes and highly advanced cities, a stark contrast to the small, modest life Mark had back on Earth. He had heard rumors about the people of Drixon. They were regal, proud, and highly protective of their traditions. As he arrived, Mark couldn't help but feel both nervous and excited. This was his chance to prove that humans weren't the helpless creatures many of the other species thought them to be. The Peace Summit was held in the Grand Hall of the Drixon Palace. Mark was one of many diplomats present, each representing different parts of the galaxy. There was one species, however, that stood out among the rest of the Drixenian royal family. The Crown Princess, Lyra, was a figure known across the galaxy for her beauty, intelligence, and poise. She had been educated by the best minds in the universe and was expected to one day lead her people. Yet despite all her accomplishments, there was an air of sadness that seemed to follow her wherever she went. Mark had noticed her the moment she entered the hall. Her presence commanded attention, and every eye in the room seemed to fall upon her. She was tall and graceful, with striking features that looked almost otherworldly. Her skin had a soft, glowing lavender hue, and her dark, flowing hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall. She wore a simple yet elegant gown that matched her dignified air. There was something about her that captivated Mark instantly, though he tried to shake off the feeling. After all, he was here for a purpose: to represent humanity, not to fall for an alien princess. During the first day of the summit, Mark was introduced to Princess Lyra in a formal setting. The conversation was brief, as expected, with Lyra being polite but distant. The royal family was known for being cautious when it came to interacting with humans, and Lyra was no different. But there was something in her eyes, something that told Mark she wasn't like the others. After the summit ended for the day, Mark wandered through the palace grounds, trying to clear his mind. The beauty of the planet was stunning, with its towering trees and vast gardens stretching for miles. The peacefulness of it all made Mark feel small in comparison, but it also gave him a strange sense of calm as he walked down a quiet path. Near the royal gardens, he saw her again, Lyra, standing by a fountain, staring out into the distance. Her expression was unreadable, but Mark could tell she was deep in thought. Without thinking, he approached her. "Princess Lyra?" he asked. Gently, not wanting to startle her, she turned slowly, her eyes meeting his. "Human," she said with a faint smile, though her voice held a hint of sadness. "You should be careful. The palace grounds can be dangerous for someone like you." Mark raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Someone like me?" Lyra nodded, her gaze drifting to the shimmering water in front of them. "You are from Earth, a species that has barely begun to grasp the complexities of the universe. My people, my society, does not accept your kind." Mark felt a sharp pang in his chest. He knew that humans weren't highly regarded in the galaxy, but hearing it from someone so powerful, so graceful, made it hit harder than he expected. "Not here to cause trouble," he said, trying to sound calm. "I just want to help, create peace between our people." Lyra turned to face him fully now, her eyes softening. "I know," she said quietly. "I've heard of your people, Mark Anderson. They have a ... unique spirit. But that does not change the fact that you are an outsider here, and it will always be that way." Mark felt a strange pull in his chest. There was something in her voice, something that made him feel both sympathy and understanding. He had read about the rigid structures of alien societies, the way they held onto their traditions, but he had never expected to feel this strongly about it. He had hoped that perhaps the galaxy could find common ground. But it seemed like the divide between humans and the rest of the galaxy was too great to overcome, as they stood there in silence. The gentle sound of the fountain filling the air. Mark couldn't help but feel a connection to Lyra. It was subtle, but it was there. He'd heard the rumors about her, how she was destined for greatness, how she was meant to marry a powerful alien prince and continue the royal lineage. But here, in this moment, she seemed so much more human than he had ever imagined. Lyra's voice broke the silence again. I wish I could marry someone like you, Mark. Someone kind. Someone who understands. But my society would never accept it. You don't belong here. Mark swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. He knew she was right. Wasn't a part of her world. But that didn't stop the feelings that had started to grow between them. He wanted to tell her that there was more to life than what her society dictated, but he wasn't sure how. I don't belong here either, he said softly, his words surprising even himself. But maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe we don't have to fit in to make a difference. Lyra looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of hope. You're a dreamer, Mark, she whispered. A human. But in this world, dreams are crushed by reality. The weight of those words hung heavy between them, but in that moment, Mark couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Perhaps their worlds were far apart, but for the first time, he didn't feel so alone in this vast, strange galaxy. The days passed quickly as the Galactic Peace Summit continued, and Mark found himself growing more and more fascinated by Princess Lyra. They saw each other often, but the meetings were always brief and formal, filled with discussions about trade, peace, and cooperation. However, in the quiet moments, away from the eyes of the other diplomats, Lyra and Mark would find ways to meet in secret. They would walk along the palace gardens, or talk under the cover of the grand halls, where no one could hear them. Each conversation felt like a small escape from the world that surrounded them. Mark began to see a side of Lyra that was rarely shown to anyone. She was kind, funny, and most of all, deeply conflicted. Mark, for his part, found himself drawn to her in a way he couldn't explain. He had never met anyone like her before, someone so intelligent, so beautiful, yet so trapped by her own world. One evening, after a particularly long day at the summit, Lyra invited Mark to the palace's private garden. Stars shone brightly above them, and the air was cool and still. As they walked along a narrow path lined with tall, fragrant flowers, Lyra stopped suddenly and turned to face him. Mark, she began, her voice filled with uncertainty. I need to tell you something I should have said before. Mark felt his heart race at the seriousness in her tone. What is it, Lyra? She sighed, her breath catching in the quiet night air. I'm not like the others, Mark. I know how my people see you, how they see humans. I know that they will never accept you. They will never accept ... us. Her voice cracked slightly as she spoke the words, and Mark felt a pang of sadness in his chest. I don't care about what they think, Mark said quickly, his voice filled with a determination he hadn't realized he had. I care about you. Lyra shook her head, her long hair falling around her face like a dark veil. You don't understand. It's not that simple. I can't just ignore everything I've been taught, everything my people expect of me. I am the future ruler of Drixon. My choices are not mine alone to make. I took a step closer, his heart aching at the thought of the weight she carried on her shoulders. You don't have to follow anyone else's rules, Lyra. You're your own person. You don't have to let your society decide what you feel. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face, as if trying to find something she had lost. I do, Mark. I can't escape my responsibilities, no matter how much I want to. And even if I could, my people would never accept a relationship like ours. They would never accept a human, not as a partner, not as a ruler. Mark felt his chest tighten as he realized the truth in her words. He had always known that their love would be difficult, but hearing it spoken out loud made it feel real. Still, he wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. I don't care about your society, Mark said, his voice steady. I care about you, and I think you care about me too. Lyra's eyes filled with tears as she turned away from him. I do care about you, Mark. More than I ever thought I could. But it doesn't matter. It can't matter. She paused, her shoulders shaking slightly. I wish I could marry someone like you. I wish I could live in a world where it didn't matter that you're a human, but my society won't accept it. They never will. Mark stepped forward and gently touched her shoulder, turning her to face him again. Lyra, we don't have to change the galaxy to be together. We just have to be strong enough to fight for what we believe in. Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with sorrow and longing. I wish it were that simple, Mark. But I can't change centuries of tradition. I can't change everything that's expected of me. And I don't want to see you suffer because of it. I don't want to hurt you. Mark's heart felt like it was breaking. He could see how torn she was, how much she wanted to follow her heart, but felt bound by the chains of her responsibilities. I'm not afraid of the consequences, Mark said softly, his voice steady and sure. I'm not afraid of what people might think. I only care about you, Lyra, and I believe you feel the same way. Lyra closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. I do feel the same way, she whispered. But it's not enough, not in a world like this. They stood in silence for a long time, the weight of their unspoken words hanging between them. Finally, Lyra broke the silence with a soft, almost bitter laugh. I thought meeting a human would be ... different. But I didn't expect to feel like this. I didn't expect to fall in love with someone who isn't even allowed to be part of my world. Mark reached out and wiped the tear from her cheek, his heart aching at the sadness he saw in her eyes. Maybe we don't need to be part of your world, Lyra. Maybe we just need to be part of each other's world. A world where we don't care what others think. She smiled faintly, but there was no joy in it. I wish it were that easy, Mark. I really do. The stars above seemed to grow dimmer as they stood there, each of them lost in their thoughts. Mark knew that the path ahead would be difficult, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he and Lyra were meant to find a way to be together. Even if the universe stood against them, he wasn't ready to give up on her and Lyra. Despite all the doubt and fear in her heart, wasn't ready to give up on him either. Days turned into weeks, and the Galactic Peace Summit continued its quiet progress. Mark and Lyra's secret meetings became a lifeline, a brief escape from the overwhelming pressures of their respective roles. Every time they were together, it felt like the world outside vanished, leaving only the two of them, caught between the boundaries of duty and desire. Despite the growing connection between them, the weight of Lyra's responsibilities continued to loom over them like a shadow. Mark could see it in her eyes every time they met, a struggle hidden behind her smiles. She was a princess, a future ruler, bound by a life she did not choose, and the society she had been born into made it impossible for her to even imagine a future with him. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at the summit, Mark found Lyra in the palace gardens, sitting alone by the fountain. The soft sound of water splashing against stone filled the quiet night. Mark approached slowly, not wanting to disturb her. But Lyra turned to him as soon as she heard his footsteps. "You're late?" she said, her voice quiet but sharp, though there was no anger in it. Only a trace of sadness. "I'm sorry," Mark said, sitting down next to her. "I didn't want to leave the meeting, but I needed to see you." Lyra's lips curled into a small, sad smile. "You're always saying things like that, Mark, but in the end, what does it matter? We can't change what's already been decided. Our worlds are too different." Mark sighed, running his fingers through his hair. He had heard those words from her many times, but they didn't get easier to hear. "Lyra, I don't care about the differences between our worlds. I care about you. And every time I see you, I feel like maybe there's hope. Maybe there's a way to make this work." She looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "Hope, ... Mark, you don't understand. I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to be the reason you get hurt. My society is unforgiving, and if they found out about us ... Mark shook his head. "I don't care about their rules. I care about you. And I don't want you to keep pushing me away because of something neither of us can control." Lyra looked down at her hands, her fingers nervously tracing the edges of her gown. "It's not just about the rules, Mark. It's about my duty. My family's expectations. My future. There is no place for someone like you in my world. You would never fit in. My people. They wouldn't accept you." Mark reached out, gently lifting her chin so she could look at him. "But why does it matter? Why can't we just live our lives the way we want to? You and me, together." Lyra's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Because the consequences would be too great. I would lose everything, my title, my people's respect, my future. I'm supposed to marry someone who can strengthen my people's position, someone powerful, someone ... who belongs to my world. Not a human. Mark's heart broke for her. He had known it wouldn't be easy, but hearing her say it out loud made it so much harder to bear. I don't want you to lose everything for me, Lyra, but I can't pretend like I don't feel something for you. You mean more to me than I can even put into words. Lyra wiped her eyes quickly and stood up, walking a few steps away from him. I never asked for this, Mark. I never asked to fall in love with someone who can never be a part of my world. But here we are, and I don't know what to do. If only things were different. ... Double quotes. Mark stood up, walking toward her, took her hand gently in his, feeling the warmth of her skin. Maybe they can be different. Maybe we can find a way to change. Things I don't know how, but I'm not ready to give up on us. Lyra turned to face him, her expression softening as she looked into his eyes. I wish I could believe that, Mark. I really do. But you have to understand, I can't just turn my back on everything I've been raised to believe. I can't ignore the weight of my people's expectations. I can't ignore the reality that we will never be allowed to be together. Mark's heart ached at the words, but he refused to let go of the hope that had been growing between them. He stepped closer, to her, holding both of her hands in his. I understand that, Lyra, but sometimes the reality of what we're told isn't the reality we have to live. We can make our own choices. We can choose our own path. Lyra gazed at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. What? If we can't? What if everything we've been taught is true? What if there's no place for us in this galaxy? Mark shook his head. Then we create our own place. We carve out our own future, no matter what anyone else thinks. For the first time since they had met, Lyra's eyes softened with something that resembled hope. It was faint, but it was there. You really believe that? I do, Mark said firmly. I believe in us. And I believe that together, we can find a way to make it work. Maybe we won't have all the answers now, but we'll figure it out. As long as we're together, Lyra closed her eyes, her grip tightening on his hands. I don't know if it will work, Mark, but for the first time, I'm willing to believe that maybe it could. The two of them stood there, their hands clasped together, the stars above them witnessing the quiet promise that had just begun. To form, the road ahead would be difficult. There would be challenges, obstacles, and sacrifices. But for the first time, both Mark and Lyra had something to hold on to, something to hope for. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The days following their quiet promise to each other felt heavier than either Mark or Lyra could have imagined. While they tried to continue their secret meetings, the weight of their situation pressed down on them more each day. Lyra's every step in the palace felt like it was under the watchful eyes of her people. Every word, every glance, carried the burden of a future she didn't want. But she had no choice. Her society had expectations, and her family had plans for her that she couldn't ignore forever. One afternoon, after the summit sessions had ended, Lyra was summoned to a private meeting with the council, the most powerful leaders of her people. Mark had warned her that the council would not take kindly to her growing connection with him. Still, she had hoped that maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't notice. But deep down, she knew it was only a matter of time before her actions would be questioned. As Lyra entered the Grand Council room, her heart beat loudly in her chest. The room was cold, formal, and imposing, just like the people who filled it. The council members sat at a long, polished table, their eyes trained on her as she stepped inside. Their expressions were unreadable, but Lyra could feel the weight of their gaze. She had been called here for a reason, and she feared she already knew what that reason was. Princess Lyra. One of the older council members, Zarin, said with a deep voice that echoed through the room. We have been informed of your ... activities, specifically your relationship with the human diplomat, Mark Anderson. Lyra's stomach twisted in knots at the sound of Mark's name. She had hoped that the council hadn't learned the full extent of their connection, but it seemed that hope had been in vain. I don't know what you mean, Lyra said, trying to keep her voice steady. though she could feel the nerves building up inside her. Mark and I have had several conversations. We are simply here to fulfill our duties. Zaren's eyes narrowed. You are the future leader of our people, Princess. Your duty is not only to your family, but to the entire galaxy. You cannot afford to make decisions that will shame your bloodline and endanger the future of our society. Lyra clenched her fists at her sides. She knew what was coming. The council had always placed their loyalty to tradition above anything else. And now it was her turn to pay the price for stepping out of line. We are aware of your growing affection for the human, another council member, Alira, said coldly. We cannot allow this to continue. The future of our people is at stake. The last thing we need is for our princess to be distracted by someone who does not belong to our world. Lyra's breath caught in her throat as the council's words hit her like a blow. I never asked for any of this, she whispered, the tears threatening to spill over. I never wanted to fall in love with someone like Mark, but I can't control how I feel. And that is precisely the problem, Zaren replied sharply. Your feelings may be your own, but your role as the future ruler is not. You are bound by duty to this society, and it is time you understood the consequences of your actions. This human, Mark, represents a threat to everything we have worked for. He does not belong here. He's a distraction, and distractions must be removed. Lyra's heart dropped at his words. She'd feared this moment, but hearing it from the council, hearing the cold, unfeeling words made it even worse. They'd wanted to scream, to fight back, but she knew it would be useless. The council's power was too great. Her voice faltered as she spoke. Please, she pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark is not a threat. He's just ... a human. Has no power, no intention of taking anything from our people. He just wants peace. He just wants a chance to show that humanity is more than what they think. And that is precisely why this will never work, Zaren said with finality. The humans are inferior. They will never understand our ways. And you, Princess, are not to waste your time on them. If you continue this relationship, you will lose everything. Your title, your position, your future, your people's respect. The words stung, each one a sharp reminder of the life Lyra had been born into. A life she could never escape. She had always known that her duty came first. She had been raised to lead her people, to protect them, to keep their traditions alive. And yet, standing before the council, all Lyra could feel was a sense of hopelessness that she couldn't shake. I understand, Lyra said quietly, her voice breaking. I will stop seeing him. I will do as you ask. Zaren nodded, his expression softening slightly, but his eyes remained cold. You will return to your rightful place, Princess. No more distractions. No more ... human influence. You will marry one of our own, someone who will help you lead our people into the future. Lyra's heart sank as the council's words settled in her chest like a heavy weight. She had made her choice. She would follow their orders, as she always had. But the thought of losing Mark, of losing everything she had ever believed in, made her feel as if she was giving up on a dream that had been her only source of hope. As she left the council room, the echoes of their words followed her. She had always known that duty came first, but now she felt the full weight of what it meant. The rest of her life had been decided for her. There was no place for Mark in it. But even as the door closed behind her, a small part of Lyra refused to let go of what they had shared. Even if the galaxy demanded her sacrifice, she wasn't sure she could ever truly forget Mark, or the hope he had given her that there might be a different way to live. The days after the council's decree were some of the hardest Lyra had ever faced. She returned to the palace, her heart heavy with the knowledge that her feelings for Mark had cost her the freedom she had longed for. Her life, once filled with hope and possibility, now felt like a prison. The council had spoken. Her duty was clear. I had to marry someone from her own world, someone who could strengthen the power and position of her people. And Mark, the human who had stolen her heart, was nothing more than a distant dream she could never reach. Mark, too, was struggling. Every day he sat through the summit meetings, his thoughts constantly drifting to Lyra. He could see the pain in her eyes when they spoke, the way she held herself back, trying to be the princess her people wanted her to be. He had never imagined that he would fall for someone so far out of his reach. But now, every moment without her felt like an eternity. He knew that Lyra had obeyed the council's orders. She had stopped seeing him, had distanced herself from the only connection that had made her feel truly alive. Mark was angry at the situation, angry at the society that kept Lyra trapped in a life she didn't want. But more than anything, he was scared that he might never see her again, that the bond they shared would be lost forever. But Lyra wasn't ready to let go. Despite the council's orders, despite the weight of her responsibilities, she couldn't stop thinking about Mark. She couldn't stop imagining a life where they could be together. Free from the pressures of her royal duties, she had tried to ignore the longing in her heart, but it was impossible. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that she couldn't live without him. One night, as Lyra sat alone in her chamber, staring out the window at the stars, she made a decision. She would not give up. She would not let her life be decided for her by a council that did not understand her. They would find a way to be with Mark, no matter the consequences. She quietly packed a bag with only the essentials: clothes, money, and a few personal items, and slipped out of her chamber. The palace was eerily quiet in the middle of the night, and she moved swiftly through the halls, careful not to wake anyone. Her heart raced in her chest, but she felt a strange sense of determination. This was her chance to take control of her own future, to make a choice that was hers alone, as she made her way to the palace's back gate. Lyra's mind raced with thoughts of what would come next. She had no idea where she and Mark would go. The galaxy was vast, and they would be fugitives, hunted by her own people. But she didn't care. As long as she was with him, she could face anything. Outside the gate, Mark was waiting for her as he had promised. The sight of him, standing there in the shadows, filled her with a mixture of relief and fear. Relief because she was finally free, and fear because she knew the risks they were both taking. "Lyra," Mark whispered, his voice soft but filled with urgency. "You made it." "I had to," Lyra replied, her voice shaking slightly. "I couldn't stay. I couldn't live in a world where I had to choose between duty and love." Mark reached out, pulling her into his arms. For a moment, everything else faded away: the palace, the council, the galaxy. All that mattered was the two of them together. "We'll be all right," Mark said, his voice filled with quiet conviction. "We'll find a place where we can live in peace. We'll figure it out, Lyra. We don't have to face this alone." Lyra closed her eyes, breathing in the familiar scent of him. "I hope so. I don't know what's waiting for us, but I know I can't go back. Not now. Not after everything we've shared." With that, they turned and walked quickly toward the nearby docks, where Mark had arranged for a small ship to take them away from Drixon. It was their only chance to escape before the palace realized she was missing. The ship was waiting, its engines already running, ready to carry them far from the life Lyra had known. As they approached the ship, Lyra looked back one last time at the palace, the place where she had been born, raised, and taught to serve her people. It had been her home, her duty, her future. But now it felt like a distant memory, something she could no longer hold on to. The life she had been expected to live was slipping away, replaced by the unknown. And for the first time, she felt a sense of freedom she had never known. "We're doing the right thing, aren't we?" Lyra asked softly as they boarded the ship, her voice filled with uncertainty. Mark nodded, his expression serious but kind. "We're doing what feels right for us. No one can tell us what our lives should be." The ship lifted off the ground, soaring into the sky, leaving Drixon behind. As they flew away, the stars above them seemed brighter, the vastness of the galaxy suddenly filled with possibility. But Lyra knew the road ahead would not be easy. They were breaking the laws of her society, and they would be hunted, but in that moment, all that mattered was that they were together. And though the future was uncertain, Lyra felt a flicker of hope in her heart. Perhaps this was the beginning of a new life, one that was theirs to create. The days that followed their escape were filled with uncertainty. Lyra and Mark had taken a ship and flown into the unknown, leaving Drixon and its oppressive society behind. They knew the risks. They knew the council would be furious when they discovered Lyra was missing, and there would be no shortage of people hunting them down. But even with the fear pressing down on them, there was something else, something stronger than the fear. It was the feeling of freedom, of taking control of their own destiny. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt like she was living for herself. There were no rules to follow, no duties to fulfill, no expectations to meet. She could choose her future, and as much as she knew the dangers they faced, she couldn't help but feel relieved. She was with Mark, and that was all that mattered. The small ship they had stolen was perfect for their escape. It was fast, sleek, and capable of hiding. In the vastness of space, they traveled from system to system, always staying a few steps ahead of the people sent to find them. But as time passed, the reality of what they had done began to set in. There was no going back. If they were caught, Lyra would be forced to return to her life on Drixon, her heart broken and her dreams crushed. One evening, as they sat in the small cockpit of the ship, watching the stars drift by, Lyra turned to Mark. "What if we're caught?" she asked quietly. "What if they find us and force me to go back? I don't think I could bear it." Mark looked at her, his expression filled with determination. "We won't let that happen, Lyra. We'll keep running. We'll keep fighting. For the life we want together. As long as we don't give up, we're not defeated." Lyra sighed, leaning her head against the seat. "But what if it's too much? What if we can't keep running forever?" Mark reached over, gently taking her hand in his. "We'll figure it out, Lyra. Together. That's what matters." She looked at him, feeling the warmth of his hand in hers. There was so much uncertainty in their lives now, so much they didn't know about what lay ahead. But in that moment she realized that it didn't matter. She didn't need all the answers. She didn't need the galaxy to be perfect. All she needed was Mark, and as long as they had each other, maybe they could make it work. The next few days were spent in quiet solitude as they continued their journey, moving deeper into uncharted space. They found a remote planet, a place that was still untouched by the galactic conflicts that surrounded them. It was a beautiful place, covered in lush forests and rolling hills. It felt like a place where they could start over, where they could build a life away from the chaos of the galaxy. But even in this peaceful setting, the shadow of their past loomed over them. They knew that eventually someone would come looking for them. The council would never let Lyra go without a fight. They had to be prepared for what would come next. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Lyra sat outside their small shelter, looking out at the peaceful world around her. She felt a strange sense of peace here. But she also knew that it wouldn't last forever. Mark came outside, sitting down next to her. He looked out at the sky, then turned to her with a serious expression. "Lyra, we need to talk." She looked at him, sensing the gravity in his voice. "What is it?" Mark hesitated for a moment, his eyes searching hers. "I've been thinking a lot about what comes next. We can't keep running forever. Sooner or later, they'll find us. And I don't want to put you in danger any more than I already have." Lyra felt her heart tighten. "What are you saying, Mark?" "I'm saying that we need to make a choice," he said, his voice soft but firm. "We can keep running, and eventually we'll be caught. Or we can face what's coming and fight for our future. We don't have to live in fear forever. But if we choose to stand and fight, we have to be ready for whatever comes next." Lyra was silent for a long moment, thinking about what he said. The thought of facing the council, of facing her past, terrified her. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she couldn't keep running. She couldn't live in fear of the consequences. She had made her choice, and it was time to stand by it. "I'm ready," Lyra said quietly, her voice filled with determination. "I've been running from this my whole life, but I won't run anymore. I want to fight for what we have. I want to fight for the life I've chosen." Mark smiled at her, his hand reaching out to hold hers. "Then we'll do it together. Whatever happens, we face it as a team." As they sat there, holding each other's hands, the weight of their decision settled in. There was no turning back now. They had chosen to fight for their future, no matter the cost. And while they didn't know what would happen next, they knew they were no longer running from their past. They were standing together, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. In that moment, Lyra felt a sense of clarity, a sense of purpose she had never known before. She had chosen Mark. She had chosen love over duty, freedom over tradition. And for the first time in her life, she felt truly free.